Hi, my name is Chinenye, and today I have my journal and my sketchbook because I want to talk to you guys about all the art I made in Italy. I want to go through each and every art piece I made and all the techniques I learned while studying printmaking abroad in Venice. So, here we go. Okay, so first off, we have woodcut release. This is one of my favorite methods, and it's usually what people think about when they think about printmaking. It's where you have a piece of wood and you carve into it with a knife or a razor blade to create this design. And what you're cutting away is going to show up white, and what you leave on is going to show up black once you print it with the ink. And so I really liked this technique because I felt so artistic, and the final design is beautiful. So here's some of my final prints. I printed it like 5 different times. Oh, I love this one. It's just so dark, and you can just see it's just so bold and beautiful, and you can see each and every different stroke. Um, but I thought this was also interesting because I had to think backwards. So because you're removing the white, you're kind of working negatively than what you're used to, because when you draw, when you paint, you're adding on the color. But we already start with the color and removing away the negative space. And so that was really difficult for me to wrap my mind around. I had a hard time with that, but the final product turned out beautiful. I can also show you some of my final sketches. I have them here. Let me see if I can find them in my sketchbook. Ah, I don't know where my sketches went. Okay, I can't find any of my sketches, but I do have some notes. So when we learned about it, this is actually a technique that originated in East Asia, and it was originally used to put on fabric, not paper. It's known as an ancient journal because a lot of people were poor. People could not read or write, and books were also very expensive. To print a book and bind a book cost a lot of money way back then. So being able to carve and print multiple prints with just one wooden plate it was cheap, it was faster, and it was affordable, and many people could read and engage with that piece of media. Um, we learned about it in the context of an Italian perspective because, I mean, the class was in Italy, and one of the first and most important maps of Venice that really made Venice the city that it is was made with this technique where you had a German entrepreneur. He's just some rich German guy. He came and he funded a project to make a map of Venice using this specific technique. I can try and insert a picture too, but that was just really cool to see the historical perspective in both an Asian global context and also how it applied to Italy. And a cool fact was that this was also used in Mexico. Jose Guadalupe Posada, he's a modern woodcut artist, and he was famous for a lot of the images he made of Saint Katrina, and he's just a very popular artist. So we studied a lot of his works, and I tried to model my work a little bit after him with like all the lines he used, but he was obviously really good at it, and I couldn't do it. But overall, I really, really liked this technique. Another cool fact was that this specific technique, because of the wood, they would make playing cards out of it. And so you would just make all the 52 different cards, and you could just print each card. And what that one thing that really stuck with me when we were learning about the technique was sacred and profane. Um, a lot of things printed with woodcut release were either sacred things, right, like saints or the Virgin Mary, or images of women, or they were really profane. And that's where the playing cards come in, because playing cards were associated with gambling and things like that. And so kind of just like this beauty and this duality of a very simple technique can be used to make all these different things that are sacred and profane, or are these big maps or these news articles or just these big images. And so I just love this technique. I'm very proud of myself for being able to do this. I thought I was going to give up halfway through because I initially had a different design that was way more detailed, and I just didn't have enough time. And I'm also not an artist. This is my first time drawing in, like, God knows, probably my whole life, really. And so I'm just really proud of myself for how it turned out. And I need to actually hang up my prints on this wall. And I still need to sign them on the bottom, but I'm just genuinely obsessed with the way this looks. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. And the name of this art piece is Sacred and Profound, because I'm looking at like the bodies of women, which are can be looked at as sacred or profound, and they're kind of just dancing, and dancing is a form of like expression that is also looked at as something sacred or something profane as well. And so yeah, I'm just obsessed. This is definitely my number one favorite piece. And that was everything I learned in terms of what my second favorite technique, also in my favorite prints as well, is dry pointing. So dry pointing is traditionally done with a pointed needle on metal, usually a copper metal, but the program that I was a part of focused on sustainability. And so we used soybean ink to that was which is a more sustainable ink in comparison to petroleum inks, which most print shops use. And then we also would use this reusable plastic Tetra Pak material. So instead of sourcing metal and prepping the metal, we used old boxes that people were going to throw away anyways, and it still produced a very beautiful print in the end. Um, yeah, so usually copper is commonly used and it's more expensive. And but we use a Tetra Pak milk carton. And then we would also use things like socks as gloves and pasta makers to print. There's just a lot of sustainability that was involved in this. And I think that's why I really liked it, because I was connecting different parts of things that I was interested in to make this art. But a lot of printmaking techniques, this one as well, comes from Asia. And so this was my final print. I love this print as well. And this was the matrix. The matrix is what you're using to print. It's what you actually put your art on. So what you see is it was originally a square, but I cut this piece off with scissors, and I used a box cutter to make these cuts, because wherever you leave a gap, that's going to be white because it's the paper. And then whenever you peel off a layer of the Tetra Pak, it's gonna absorb all of this ink, and that's how you're gonna have this big black like blotch. And things do print in reverse, but it still turned out beautiful. I really loved the way this final print looked at. And you can see over here that where I cut, some of it is black, some of it is white, based on how deep I chose to cut. And I just really love the deep detailing in his jacket. But this piece was supposed to represent indifference. So I was really inspired by how Italy, especially Venice, is such a religious city, right? There's so many religious artifacts everywhere you go, but then it's also not. At the same time, nobody seems to really care. Like, if you live there, you're kind of numb to all the art around you. And so this is a great example of that. This is what inspired me, because you have this priest who is obviously a sacred figure, and then this over here is supposed to represent kind of like the Holy Spirit almost, or maybe like just religion in general. And you can see that he's clothed in religious wear, but his face is dark. You can't see an expression. He's kind of indifferent to what he's wearing and what's going on around him. So it kind of just represents a relationship that Venetians, but people in general, may have to religion, where you are surrounded by it, but you may be indifferent to it, or your reaction to it is unknown. And so I really, really liked this piece. This is my final print, but I made about 5 of these just to get to this point, because I had to learn how to properly shade and remove highlights. So you'll see in this print, you'll see in this print there's a little bit more white and a little bit more dimension, because I removed more white around the priest to just give it some more dimension. But I do think I like this one better than this one. But this one is printed on Fabriano paper, which is a very fancy paper. So technically speaking, this one would be the better one. But I'm biased to this one. So yeah, I really, really like these. I almost forgot to mention the other dry pointing prints that I made. So we have this one. I was obviously inspired by the wine. These are all supposed to be bookmarks. That's why I chose this shape. But I can't even use them as bookmarks because the ink is going to rub off on my books. I did not know that, so I might laminate these. But I carved into here, and we would ink it, and that's where I got this print. I like this print because the lines are so neat and clean. You can just really see how much lines play a role in the dimension of the piece. So I really like that, looking at neatness and structure and lines. But this one, I'm very biased to this one, because I was reading a book called African Venice, and in the line of a book, it was saying that black people are associated with wind and water. So back then in ancient Venice, there was a lot of things within racial dynamics. There wasn't necessarily slavery, but they did look at black people a certain kind of way. But then black people were also held in high regard, especially like with Africans and trading and stuff. So it was a very interesting dynamic that black people in the face of all these gondoliers and things, were associated with the wind and water. And so that's why this figure is black, to represent just skin tone, obviously skin tone, but just their place in society. But they're on this gondola on top of this water, but they're blowing wind outside of their mouth. And this is how the final print looked like. And I like this one. I do think I could have cleaned it up a little better technique-wise, but I'm very happy with how it turned out. I put a lot of effort into this print. And this one is a throwaway. Oh, this one's also really cute. Sorry, this is an old one. I like this one. You guys can see how much inking and dimension, because you can see there's like a little bit of white left over in this one, but this one appears lighter than that one. It's because I removed a lot of ink. I'm going all over the place. I'm just really excited explaining all of my art. But this was a throwaway. It was supposed to be fishes. Like, I'm really into fish just because fish are cool, and I think fish are cross-cultural. They're global animals. They're everywhere. And so I made these bookmarks, but my technique, I did not like it. I wish I would have inked it differently or put less detail in the fish, because I feel like a lot of the ink was drawn to here. But it turned out to be cool enough. It's just, this is probably like one of my least favorite prints from the experience. But I'm glad that I made them. Yeah. Okay, so next up I have letterpress. Letterpress is pretty much self-explanatory. It's what people think of when you think of printmaking. When back in the old days when they wanted to make a newspaper, they would prep the print and they would put all the letters one by one and roll it out, roll it out. This technique, I think because I've already seen it before in TV shows and movies, it wasn't that moving to me, but it was cool because everybody on our trip, or everybody that was part of the art program I was a part of, we each got to pick a word and put it on the letterpress, but we couldn't see the other words each other were choosing for the print, and then it resulted in kind of this final print of a bunch of random words, but it also encompassed us as a group in our trip. And so this is the poster that I ended up with. I chose the name Anjali, or not the name, the word Anjali, because my middle name is Angel. That's why my channel is called Chinenye's Angel. But then you see some people chose more profane words. Somebody chose the word pigeon. I think it's showing up backwards. But this is snazzy, but somebody put it upside down to give it more dimension. But I actually was the one who chose this background because I thought it would really contrast nicely. Like, I like how this darker ink, you can't really read it too well up here, but you can read the ink well over here. I just think it really adds dimension. But this was a fun technique to learn. I think because it's so common, it gave me a lot of appreciation for people back then who had to do this almost every day to have up-to-date newspapers. But yeah, it was fun to learn. Okay, next up we have monotype. Monotype uses one matrix. The matrix is the mother. It is what creates the print. And so in monotype, you'll have this one matrix, and in every subsequent print, you'll add ink, you'll add detail to it to create your final image. And I think a great example is this monotype print that I made. It was inspired by all the wine in Venice. I feel like in Italy in general, wine is more accessible than water. I feel like I drank more alcohol than I did water. But this is the final print, but it all started with this. And so I inked the matrix in black, and I removed some of these wine bottles. I think it's upside down. I removed some of these wine bottles just using a rag just to shape it out for me. And in the second print, I added these. And so you'll see the black in the background. That's called a ghost. It's the ghost of the first print, because now it's lighter and I printed it again. And then now after this one, that's when I decided to add the wine labels. And then this purple you're seeing here is the ghost of this one. And as you can see, is we're adding more and more as we continue to print. And this final edition of all the ghosts and all the detail, all the ink, that is your final print. And so this one was cool because you kind of had to think backwards and how you wanted to do the layers. Because if I would have done the bottles first, the purple would have been lighter than the black. And so you just have to think backwards, which is not as difficult for me in comparison to the wood relief, but it was interesting to see how the order of printing and the color of ink used affected your final print. But I really, really do like this one as well. I think I like the smudging aspect and how they look like bottles, but they're still like messy. I love a good intentional messiness to a piece of art. And so that was monotyping. I made a lot of monotypes, but this is my favorite one, so I'm only going to show this one. If you guys want to see my other ones, let me know. But that was my favorite print from that specific technique. All right, now we have fanzine. Fanzine was one of the most interesting ones because I did not know it was considered a printmaking technique. And so you need to remember this is a printmaking class. And so when I found out we were learning it, I was so confused. But for those of you who don't know, a fanzine, commonly known as a zine, is a little booklet that is made out of one piece of paper. So if I open this up right now, you'll see that it's just made by one sheet of paper, but it's been cut and folded to look like a booklet. And so you can just fold it back up. And what you'll see with this, we use a technique to make it inverted as well. So there's also, it's two books in one. And so fanzines are interesting because they are usually related to subcultures and really like progressive movements. And so first they were initially tied to sci-fi comics in the 1920s. Sci-fi was not the most popular, and so authors needed a way to publish their books or get their books or ideas out there, and so they would make their own zines. Zines are a key part of a zine. Making a zine is that it is self-published. It's not distributed by these big corporations. And it was later tied to the Dada movement. And then in the 60s and 70s, non-traditional artists, they would use zines to circulate their art. They didn't want to be tied to these galleries or these museums, so they made zines and they would circulate these within their community, within artist communities. And then in the 90s, we see that zines end up being tied to second wave feminism. And you can see this today in a lot of grassroots or coalition groups. They make zines with information on how to get involved, how to help your neighbors, how to help those around you. And my favorite part about zines is how they're very amateur and very authentic. And I think that's what makes them them. Then you can see that a bunch of people came together and put all this stuff together to make this zine, and you can see little imperfections. So you can see on this page, this is the page that I made. It got cut off here. You would not see that in a commercially produced book. They would not allow a mistake like that. But because it was a zine and it was made by a bunch of amateurs, anything goes really. And there's so many different styles of zines. We were able to go into the studio and look at all of these, not professional zines, but a lot of master artists, I would say. They made zines and they approached it from such an artistic way that I don't even think I could because I'm such an amateur in terms of art. But our group, right? So because it was a printmaking class, we were in. It was a classroom. We had groups. We had students, and so we were all tasked with making one page. And so I made this collage that was inspired by our time in Venice. We did go out a lot, and then we would meet a bunch of like random men. Nothing crazy, like they would just come and talk to us. But I made a list of like all like the funny men we met, and so it was just funny. It's an inside joke almost. And I used this glitter silver yarn as kind of an explosion, and we have some wine bottles. And this down here says Intimate Venice. This says intimate events, intimate music, intimate places, and I feel like it really does describe the time we had in Venice. And so what you'll see in the final zine we made, everybody was responsible for their own page. And so this zine is an agglomeration of everybody's different pages. And so, like I said before, this is the nighttime book, but if we take the zine and we flip it, hold up, let me flip it. We open it up, we flip it over, and we fold it just like we folded the other book. We're then shown and exposed to the daytime zine. And that's why I think this is so cool, because it's two books in one, and it allows you to see more art and more individuality within the book. Sorry, I'm trying to fold it right now. It's actually way harder to fold. Okay. Yes. Okay, like this. I got it now. And so what you'll see is we went for a postcard theme. So we all worked together on this front page, and then this back page is kind of, it's like the back of a postcard. We have a stamp here, and you'll see that different people had different styles. So this was hand-drawn. This was collaging. This was mixed media. So we have some collaging. We have some hand illustration. This was mixed media. So she took a bunch of other prints and put them together. This collage, I love it so much. It was just one random piece of colorful paper, and she meticulously cut them up to make it look like a water scene. And there's a cute little itty bitty boat right here that I find it so adorable. I just think it's so beautiful. And I think because I was there and I was watching them make all of these pages, I'm just like really, really enamored by it almost. And so now I'm flipping the zine again so you can see the nighttime version of it. And so we made it that way, so it's like two different books, two different colorways, because now it's the same cover as before, but now it's darker because it's nighttime. And you'll see here the things here are darker. So this is mine. Obviously, we went out at nighttime. One of our classmates, she drew this by hand. The background is an old throwaway print somebody didn't want, and so she used it as her background to add dimension. And then this is just, there's a lot of going on here. I can't even describe it. But I like this one. It says bellissima. It's a word we would use on the trip a lot. And then finally, we have this scene. It's a collage. This collage is truly really, it's like way more in depth than you think. There's so many different pieces of paper here. And in the middle, it says ciao. So we make sure to put on the back because if you didn't know, ciao means bye in Italian. But I just love this book so much because I think it perfectly encompasses everything that we learned and did on the trip. I really hope you guys enjoyed looking at all the art I made. I had so much fun on this trip. I mentioned this before, but I'm currently in college. I'm a STEM major, so I've just never had the chance to just go out and do art, just sit there for weeks and days at a time and just do art. So having the opportunity to learn all these techniques and create all these pieces that I'm genuinely in love with, it was truly once in a lifetime. And so I'm really excited about that. I hope you can see my excitement. But if you guys ever want more videos about the art or just my experience in Italy or the classes I'm taking or why I chose to do it, just let me know because I love talking about it. And I hope to see you guys soon. Bye.